Well, this is going to be a fun conversation today because this topic stems from really what Krista and I have been talking about offline, if you will, that we are in the throes of launching kids into different phases of young adulthood. And I still have a high schooler and even a middle schooler at home, but I am also dealing with my first college graduate as she launches into the world, and I have a college student. And every time, every summer, I feel like I see these lists for parents that are geared towards younger kids about all of the things your kids should know before they graduate from high school. And I was thinking, where is the list of things for after that? The things that
Mm.
we maybe aren't teaching our kids, but we're talking to our young adult children about. What are the things that we need to make sure we have covered as parents for them? So that was kind of the impetus of this topic. And our kids might know how to make a grilled cheese sandwich, but they might not know how to renew their passport. Those are the kinds of things we want to be talking about. And we also want you to know that clearly every family is different. Every situation is different. So we're not going to say, these are the things you should pay for, these are the things you shouldn't. But we're going to talk about the questions we're asking and make sure that these are the things you're thinking about and perhaps pre-deciding if you're married with your husband, your spouse, if you're single, that you're deciding on your own, like, these are the values I want to hold as I'm making these decisions so that when things come up, you are prepared. Because I have found the number one sticking point for me this summer has been when I have been taken by surprise. Because when I've been taken by surprise, which I'm not often, as an Enneagram 6, I pre-think
No,
about a lot of things.
you are not.
But when I'm taken by surprise, I have gut responses. Therefore, they're not always the kindest. And I usually say too much, right? So anyway, that's why we're doing this. What would you like to say, Krista, before we jump into kind of the meat of what we're talking about?
Yeah, I would just say that these are the things I have to remind myself of a lot.
Yes. Mhm.
But to really think about our kids launching into their young adulthood as more of a process than a moment.
Mhm.
So it's not like this one time conversation or this one decision that they make. It's actually a journey that we're both on. So if we can see it like that, if we're like on the Camino trail and it takes a very long
Mhm.
time. It takes a long time. And also acknowledging, I think, that this tension that I'm feeling, that I know a lot of parents are feeling, between holding on and letting go.
Mhm.
And that at any given moment, those things are often in tension. And we're trying to do both well. We're trying to let go, and we're also trying to be loving and be involved. And sometimes those are in conflict. So I guess just acknowledging that. And then also that there's this idea. Actually, my husband and I were just talking about this last night, and we keep coming back to it with these young adults, is that we have to have a posture of healthy detachment.
Mhm.
And that does not mean we're giving up or like throwing our hands completely off or withholding love or anything like that. It just means we're trusting God more than our grip. I heard someone say that one time, and I was like, that's so good. We're trusting God more than our grip on them. And it's also something that I'm finding I have to daily hand over and tell myself, remember, this is a process. Get your healthy detachment on. This is
Mhm.
theirs to solve. This is theirs to work out. And I just get to support them and be once removed. And I think as parents, we just struggle. I struggle with that.
Mhm.
And, it's that whole idea of we're being available but not invasive, and we're letting them work through things. Also, this whole like mental kind of mindset of I love you too much to rescue you from hard things, especially now that you're in your young adulthood and you have to learn these things.
Mhm.
I mean, this is a conversation I had recently with someone, even around their mental health. So I was talking to a parent
Mhm.
who was really concerned about their young adults' mental health. And I was talking about this healthy detachment. And I was saying to her, at this stage, you've done all the things. You've had the talks, you've taken them to the doctor, you've done all the things. And at some point, they have to take responsibility for their
Mhm.
own mental health in their young adulthood. Like, you can't do it for him. You can't.
Mhm.
He, at some point, has to own that. And so it's this really hard thing, but I think it's an important, like, for us to kind of go into this conversation with a little bit of that frame too, that at this phase in life, they have to start taking responsibility and owning things. And it's
Mhm.
uncomfortable for us to let them.
Mhm. Yeah, especially if we have been the mom that has taken care of a lot of things. Like, there are
Hmm.
just so many details that I have taken care of for my kids, and partly because it is my joy,
Hmm.
right? I love doing things for my kids. I
Right.
love it.
Hmm.
So, that's part of it too, is it's not always out of a bad motive of
Mm-mm. No, in fact,
controlling
most of the time it's not.
or manipulating. It's out of this
Mm-mm.
sense of, I wanna be helpful. And so recognizing that sometimes my helpfulness is not perceived as help and therefore is not received as help.
Well,
Um,
and that maybe, and I'm not saying this to you directly,
mhm,
more as a general, and maybe the help actually isn't helpful
mhm,
because it's time for us to take our hands off of those things a little bit.
mhm, right.
And maybe our help is hurting them by not
Mm,
allowing them to take responsibility. And
sure.
that is hard as a mom.
Mhm. Yeah.
So let's dive into this checklist for young adults. This is not about perfection. Again, it's a process and preparation. We're trying to prepare them for
Mhm,
their young adulthood, help prepare them. And if we think of it like we are a coach, we're a
mhm,
guide, we're someone, just again, if we think of it like the Camino trail in Spain, we're on the journey with them on
mhm,
this long journey. So let's start with identity, Alex. How
mhm,
do we help them bolster those feelings of self worth and identity
mhm,
so that they have a good foundation?
mhm. Well, I think always saying that we believe in them, pointing out the ways that they have succeeded, the hard things that they have already overcome. Um, but for my kids, and this is, I experience this as an adult daily, is a lot of tension in life is about meeting and navigating unmet expectations. So as I think about, especially my older two girls, some of the challenges they've had over the last 5 or 6 years, a lot of it has been, I didn't think things would go this way. It's not necessarily that things are going a bad way, but it's a way that I wasn't thinking they were gonna go, and I can relate to that, right? That's so much of life, is I didn't think that this was the way it was going to be, and so it's a lifelong muscle that I think we can help coach our kids through by saying, "I see that, I understand that, so you're leading with empathy, and this is how I have navigated it," or, "These are some things you might wanna consider," or, "It's time to be considering plan B, and what does plan B look like for you?" And offering them those tools and remembering, I forget sometimes that my kids have not navigated something before, so then I get frustrated, but reminding myself, "Oh, this is a first for you, and so here are some maybe ideas if you would like them," and helping them to develop flexibility. Because when we're people who are flexible, we are more likely to be people of grace, to extend grace to others, to extend grace to ourselves, because we're recognizing the world doesn't operate as it should in our minds. And that's really what I want to help them be able to do as adults, because their lives are just going to feel so much easier if they can navigate with some flexibility and grace towards the world, towards other people, and towards themselves. So I will say one example of realizing that our life, because, our kids are coming from our family.
Hmm.
So our family structures, no matter, and their life experiences help develop their expectations.
Hmm.
So one example is going off to college. Derek and I walked into our freshman dorm rooms and met our lifetime best friends. We did, right? So Derek, my husband, freshman roommate is Eric, Krista's husband, best friends for life. And two of my three roommates from that room were bridesmaids in my wedding. Like, they are my lifetime close sisters. Our kids have heard those stories and know those people, like, know them well. They are the adults that have loved them their whole lives. So they walked into their freshman dorm room kind of hoping that would be the case.
Right.
And it wasn't. And fortunately, one of my freshman roommates has a daughter who's a little bit older. She experienced that with her daughter and was like, oh, hey, guess what? She kind of thought it was going to be Seward 310, which was our dorm room. And it wasn't. And I realized, like, oh, my kids probably have those expectations too.
Yeah, that's so good. I would also say around this concept of identity, just asking them some questions, So
Mhm.
in your adulthood, what do you want to be known for? What anchors are going to hold you when life gets hard? And that gets to
Mhm.
what you said earlier about values. What are their values? What are those things that are going to hold them? Because life is going to get hard. I
Mhm.
mean, especially post college as they're trying to figure that out. And life looks really differently. There's a lot of research around those couple of years right after college. It's hard for kids,
Mhm.
especially in this job market, especially in just the landscape, our cultural landscape. One of the things I actually did a talk this week around self confidence versus self worth and how self confidence is more situational and it's
Mhm.
around kind of I can statements. So I can run this marathon. I can get this job. I can, whatever it is. But those things kind of come and go and it doesn't stay. But self worth is more around the I am statements.
Mhm.
So I am a person worthy of love. I am kind. I am, whatever it is. And so, really helping them get to those I am statements, which are the things that don't change, those are unconditional. And that's really, what we want to help foster in them because those are the things that will anchor them and hold them, even when they do face failure and mistakes. And no, I am still a person worthy of love
Mhm.
in those things, even when they fail. And then I would also say helping them, and this is something you and I talk about a lot on the podcast around other things, but how do we define success? How do they define success? For example, post college life. I was just thinking about as you and I were preparing for this, I was thinking, because I have one that's just going to start his post college life. And so asking him in this next year, what does success look like for you? And
Mhm.
getting them to really talk through, okay, well, maybe success looks like learning. Maybe it looks like learning how to do job interviews well, learning some skills that will tell me whether or not this is the direction I want to go. So, what that will do is, and I need to do this with my own son, but what that will do, I think, is help them to not be so shaken when things don't go as planned, as you were
Mhm.
just talking about, because
Mhm.
they can say, okay, well, this is actually a part of my success plan is I'm just learning how to do this skill. And it helps give them a little more perspective and self-worth a little bit as
Mhm.
they're going through.
Yeah, and that's a good reminder to moms, I mean, parents in general, that when our kids are facing something hard that we can't fix, that what are those I am statements that we want to reinforce in them? Those can be our
Mm-hmm.
go-tos. When we don't know what to say, what has not changed about who they are? And
Mm-hmm.
that's what we can reflect back to them. So that's
Mm-hmm.
really helpful. Okay, let's get a little more concrete because identity
Okay.
is that's a big one. But there's some nitty-gritty things about adulting. So that's
Mm-hmm.
just we just talk about adulting all the time around here. We're like, oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that stress that you're experiencing, that's called adulting. So money is a big one. We're going to just run through some topics. What are the
Mm-hmm.
things that you want to make sure that your young adults know about money?
Mm. Right, because we have spenders and savers. And
Mm-hmm.
isn't that true? Like with four
Yeah.
kids, and both of us have four kids, you've
Mm-hmm.
got the gamut, and so
Yep.
some you don't have to have the saver budget conversation because they're just doing it. And then for
Mm-hmm.
others, you do. And so I would also just say that
Mm-hmm.
you know your young adult and you know what are their strengths. And so if it's a strength of theirs, say, wow, I am so impressed by the way you are handling your finances, the way you're budgeting. So really affirm them in that. Or if they really are not doing that, ask them, would you like some ideas? Again, we have to get permission at this phase because if we're giving unsolicited advice, we're telling them to get on a budget and that's the last thing they want to do or they feel like it's coming
Mhm.
from us rather than them. That's conversation's not going to go well.
Mhm.
But we can ask, would you like some ideas around this? Would you like some input? Would you like some knowledge around credit card use and what are the benefits? What are the pros and the cons? And, have this if you, and we can also say, would you like to set up a time where we talk about some of these more practical things about post college life or even post high school life for
Mhm.
those of you that are in that phase?
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on finances?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is where I really have to watch myself because as an Enneagram 6, I think worst case scenario for any category of topic,
Mhm.
right? So, I tend I just really have to watch myself, but I also want my kids to be informed. And
Mhm.
so that if they decide to take what I consider risky behaviors, that they're doing it with information. So, two big things for me that I see, especially on college campuses right now, that are temptations for kids are credit cards because they're easy to get. And we all know that having credit card debt with not a lot of income is not a great scenario formula for financial success. And then gambling, especially sports gambling.
Oh,
I
it's
mean,
huge.
it is such an
Mhm.
issue. And
Yep.
so I have girls, which it tends to be more of an issue for boys, but I do have girls that, like you said, have different personalities and love sports. And so that temptation could be in there for sports gambling as well. So just talking through that, talking about like, what are your peers doing? I just ask questions like, are you seeing this in your peer group? What do you think about it? And
Mhm.
what are ways that keep you from entering that? And of course, I'm curious too, is it how surrounded by some of these topics are they?
Right. Sports gambling was a huge topic and I
Mhm.
would say this is fairly new even
Mhm.
in the
Yeah.
last 2 years. So, those entering college 4 years ago, it was not the same level of sports gambling as it is now. So, for those just going to college, it's really an important conversation because it's one of the main ways that young men are bonding and probably
Mhm.
some young women also, like you said. But I know for sure it's a way young men are bonding. And so
Mhm.
if they don't do it, they don't feel as included. It's a really important conversation. We
Mhm.
had lots of those conversations this year around sports gambling.
Yeah, and one thing I heard, this just side note that I thought was really interesting is this whole like fantasy football culture that
Yes.
boys have growing up
Yep.
in middle school, high school.
Mhm.
It's just prepping them for this. So
Mhm.
just be mindful of that. That
Mhm.
might be a pathway for your
Mhm.
child if they're already involved in that kind of gaming kind of world. Okay, enough
Again,
about that.
bonding,
Yes.
gaming/bonding
Mhm.
with their peers. And so those tend to go together, which is an
Mhm.
interesting combo.
Mhm.
All right. Well, let's talk about health.
Mhm. Yeah.
What should we think about when it comes to health?
Well, so there's this whole like legal element that once your child hits 18, the doctors really can't talk to you about things. And that I hear moms all the time say this feels so frustrating, especially if your kids have complicated health issues and you've been the person on top of them for a long time. So, like, we've done the Mama Bear legal forms where we have the medical power of attorney if they get in a car accident. We've made our older girls sign that and have said, listen, I am not going to be intrusive in your health care situation. However, if you're in a coma and someone needs to make decisions, don't you want it to be your mom?
Mhm.
I mean, so they've joked that they would put each other, the older girls, and I'm like, "Well, you
Oh,
can, but do you really want that?" And they're like, "No,
uh-huh.
I actually don't want her doing that yet." So, I'd say, like, have that legal protection, and we can put a link in the show notes to that if people don't know what I'm talking about, but it's
Yeah, for
essentially
sure.
some documents, but also then just managing their own healthcare as far as making appointments, and especially if they're moving out of the house, even if they live close by. Like, when do you need to go to urgent care? How do you do that? How do you get there? How do you have the meds you need as things come up?
Mhm. Yeah.
What about you for health?
I would say beyond kind of the typical doctor's
Mhm.
appointments, dentist, dental maintenance. I mean,
Mhm.
because moms really are usually in charge of
Mhm.
that. So, talking about why it's important to go to the dentist, I mean, they have to know why. Like, why is it you have to get your teeth cleaned? Because no one's going to choose that.
Mhm.
It's uncomfortable. They don't like it. So, how is oral health connected to overall health? And helping them see the whys behind it. And then also, if they don't know a lot about basic cooking and nutrition, this is a great time to start talking to them about that.
Mhm.
Of what are whole foods? Why should we eat them? What does it do to the body?
Mhm.
Right now, I mean, I'm even with my young adults doing some days where we cook together. My kids are pretty comfortable in the kitchen because we've done that for a long time, but
Mhm.
just also helping them with what are some easy meals that they can make. Like I'm trying to have
Mhm.
that mindset too of y- having more kind of scaled back recipes that are whole food based.
Yeah, and it's fun to learn to cook with
Mhm.
someone else. And I think, like you, my kids have grown up in the kitchen, and so they're pretty comfortable, I would say, compared to their peers as far as basics of cooking. But
Mm.
as they get older, I think, okay, what are the kinds of things that they're going to want to be able to cook that they've never tried before? When they're home, let's do those together.
Mhm. Yeah, great.
Okay, what about just general organization, life? I mean, we've mentioned moms often have been the organizers, and now it's time to step back. What do they
Mm-hmm.
need to be thinking about?
Well, time management is, I think, one of the biggest. I mean,
Mhm.
even one of my kids this summer, he's got two internships and a job. And
Mhm.
time management has been his biggest struggle this summer. Like, how do I get it all done? Which that's something we face as adults all the time. How do I get it all done in a 24-hour period? So I think helping them by once they have some experience with that, and I think college, again, if you have a high schooler going to college, this is a really good conversation to have
Mhm.
because they're going to actually have more flexibility in their college schedule. But that doesn't mean they're going to use the time well.
Mm.
Really helping them think through. And once they have some experience, so actually having this conversation one semester in, or like for me, having this conversation with my son now after he's been doing two internships and a job for 2 months, that's a great conversation that we're having right now because he's got context to it.
Mhm.
And he can say, well, here's how I'm time managing well, and here's how I'm not. And then I can help. Again, we're the coaches. So asking him questions around that. Well, what could you do during this block of time? So helping them with that.
Mhm. And having self-awareness,
Mm-hmm.
because one of my girls, when she left for college, she knew this is gonna be the thing that makes or breaks me. And
Mm.
she worked hard to be intentional about it because high school was that building ground. So for those of you that still have kids in high school, I would say take advantage because my kids were super busy in high school. So they had to really manage schoolwork and sports and work well. So it is that training ground for when they have more independence.
Yeah, it's good. I would also say here's some just practical things, but how much do they wash their sheets? That's a
Mhm.
conversation I have with my sons all the time.
Uh-huh.
Why is it important to wash your sheets? I mean,
Mhm.
I literally threaten them with, you're going to get bed bugs if you don't
Mhm.
wash them on this schedule. But, and then keeping track of their important documents. How are they doing that? Are they just
Mhm.
shoving it in a drawer?
Mhm.
Or do they actually have even one of those plastic filing systems, the
Mhm.
plastic box from Target that you can put folders in and you can actually have labels on those folders and keep things organized because for college kids especially where they're in a dorm room or in a small room, helping them figure out those kind of things is really important because they actually like it once they have it. They just
Mhm.
don't have the idea to do it.
Mhm. Yeah. And it's gonna be more of a challenge for some people than others, just like money,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
The only other thing I would add is returns.
Mm.
Like my kids order so much
Mhm.
stuff online, right? So then if
Yes.
they want to return it, like that's a whole process. And again, if they're still in high school, you have the opportunity to do it with them. But just to be reminding, we've had some hard lessons about I missed the return window. And sometimes those
Oh,
are the best
yes.
lessons. Just that whole process. And mailing,
Yes.
how to mail things in general.
And looking at some companies, especially that a lot of young people are ordering from, they actually don't allow returns.
Mhm,
You can only exchange.
mhm,
And
right.
yet they're like, wait, I didn't know that. And I'm like,
Mhm,
well, it's right in that fine print on their
mhm,
website.
mhm.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Okay, what about travel? What should they think about when it comes to travel? And who's responsible for their travel, Alex?
Yeah. Well, okay. So I have been like travel agent mom, right? When we go on a family trip, I do everything. I plan everything, every little detail. But I now have kids who like to travel on their own. And so helping coaching them in things like making reservations, paying for it, documents, and then communication plan. This is true for whenever a child leaves the home, whether it's to go to college, go to camp, go to a job. What is our plan as far as communicating so that I know that you're okay? Just check ins. If they're going overseas, cell phone coverage is a big one. But even in the US, like making sure that their cell phone, I mean, I think probably everything is works pretty well everywhere, but then just also emergency plans. Do you have enough credit on a credit card that if in an emergency, and this is where talking about things like money, like what are you going to pay for? What am I going to pay for? If you want to have a policy of, listen, I know a lot of moms of girls have this policy. If you need to get an Uber, I will pay for it. My credit
Mm-hmm.
card is going to be on your Uber account. Or if you need to go to an emergency room, please don't worry about how much it's going to cost. But
Mm-hmm.
you need to decide ahead of time, what are we okay with
Mm-hmm.
covering? And again, I can think of a lot of situations with in my own friend group where some parents would have some hesitations based on kids' choices and behaviors. So I'm not saying you have to do that, but just decide ahead of time and then communicate that with your kids so that they know if you want to cover some of those things in an emergency, they don't have to wonder.
It's excellent. Those are
Mhm.
so good. What about how to navigate career choices or
Oh,
even maybe things that they feel called to?
hmm, I know. There's nothing more delightful than finding something that your young adult loves, the watching them discover it, right? It's a delight to do that, but that some kids are going to have that right away and some aren't. And that's where I try to offer freedom
Mhm.
to say, everyone's going to have a different path. And it is okay if you don't know what you want to do for the rest of your life. At the same time, we need to balance that with what's the plan for paying the bills? And
Mhm.
like there's that practical element to work as well.
Mhm.
And so kind of balancing that
Mhm.
without the pressure of, by the time you graduate from high school, you need to know what you major in, or by the time you graduate from college, you need to know what you're going to do with the rest of your life. Some kids do, some
Mhm.
don't.
That's
And
right.
offering that freedom.
Yeah, and designing their way forward. The design lab from Stanford, that's one of their big things. They have one of the most popular courses on their college campus.
Hmm.
And one of their mantras is design your way forward. You got to try stuff. Kids get stuck because
Hmm.
they're in indecision. And so their encouragement is just start doing stuff and design your way forward. You'll find your way if you're not standing still. So helping them with that, but also we'll link to the two-part series we did with Tyler Lafferty last year, how to help kids find their
Hmm.
career path. And it was a great two-part series. So we can link to that if you want to know more about what he said. It was
Hmm.
excellent. But I would also say one of the things Arthur Brooks talks about is earned success. And what that just means is it describes the feeling of fulfillment derived from creating value through work and receiving recognition for it. So it's not solely about wealth or material possessions, but instead the satisfaction of contributing meaningfully and being acknowledged for that contribution. And sometimes, so if we just say that in a short way, it's finding something that you are kind of custom fit for that's meaningful, that contributes to something outside of yourself.
Hmm.
And that may come through work, but it may not.
Hmm.
it may come through a volunteer opportunity but the point here, because he talks a lot about young adults, the point here is to help them with this idea of earned success, that you may have to kind of teach them that that's part of a fulfilling life,
Hmm.
is contributing to the world at large, but that may be in a career or it may be in a volunteer role or something
Hmm.
like that. But just finding that space, because that's part of actually real happiness. That's something Arthur Brooks talks about a lot. What actually creates real happiness? And that's one of the keys.
Yeah. Well, I think there's just in general some uncomfortable to us topics that sometimes we need to navigate with our kids too. That, like, I really wish I didn't have to talk about this, or they know how I feel about this.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I just don't really address it. And I'm guilty of that. I am completely guilty of that. And at the same time, a few years ago, we had an exchange student, high school exchange student from Italy. And I think I've maybe said this before on the podcast, but I had a moment one night when she and my daughter were going out to a party, and I realized she doesn't know the American way. She doesn't know the risks. She doesn't know her parents have entrusted her to me as far as safety goes. And I just got real direct and real blunt with her. And I said, no pills, because we just have a situation in our country where you don't know what you're taking. Stay in groups. This is, I think, a rule for girls as they go out in college too, is, you leave with the friends you came with. You don't leave anyone
Exactly.
behind. And then Uber options, always take an Uber if you need to, but do it in a group if you can. And, if people need to stay over in a dorm room, do that. But getting real direct, it was this weird situation where I practiced it with her, and then I thought, oh, maybe I should do this with everybody else in our house that's leaving for the night as well. And so I have over and over had some just real blunt, like, this is kind of a no-no. And, like, for example, getting in a car with somebody who's been drinking, that's a non-negotiable for us. And for sure, you are not to be driving if you've been drinking. And, like, my kids know that that means loss of privileges, 100%. So just kind of know what are the things that I probably should be talking about, but it makes me uncomfortable because I don't want to believe my kids are doing anything that go outside of my purview of what I would want for them. And at the same time, I want them to come home alive.
That's right. I know. I've just started saying that. Listen, I'm telling you this because I don't want you to die. I literally say
Yeah.
that. I say
Yeah.
that to them. I would add to that, Alex, that there's some things that are clear. There's
Hmm.
some things that are like, okay, we're not going to change on this. And these
Hmm.
are the things that are like you said, the non-negotiables. But then there's some things that are a conversation. And especially as kids get older.
Hmm.
And I'm finding that we're, having some topics that are arising that maybe at one time I thought were hard and fast rules.
Hmm.
And now, because of the age that they are,
Hmm.
it needs to transition to a conversation. And we come up with an idea, something like the way we're going to handle this together. And that's a transition for me,
Hmm.
and one that I'm finding that I need to make.
Yeah. And that's the growth for us as parents. It's also why the youngest always has looser rules than the oldest.
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
universal goes across cultures norm that usually is the case.
Mm-hmm.
It's because we as parents realize, like, sometimes these things that we thought were very black and white, we're
Mm-hmm.
starting to see a little more gray in. And so if you're feeling that as a parent, just
Mm-hmm.
know you are not alone.
Right.
And we are working to do the best job we can
Mm-hmm.
with the circumstances we have and the information we have available to us right now. And so
Mm-hmm.
to offer ourselves grace, if you're thinking back, which is what I often do, to be like, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I said that. That was 3 years ago and she's still holding it against me. Like, all the things, to give yourself grace and to know you did the best you could in that moment with what you had. And
Mm-hmm.
we have to move forward, and we have agency in how we can respond today.
Yeah. And I think we could say that to our kids.
Yeah.
3 years ago, I responded this way.
Hmm.
And now I've learned some things. And today, I'd like this conversation to go this way, or here's
Mhm.
how I'm thinking about this, or whatever. But we have to give ourselves permission to grow. But in
Mhm.
doing that, we actually give them permission to grow too. We're
Yeah.
modeling what that looks like. So I
Yes.
actually think that's really healthy.
Yes.
Okay. Well, Alex, this is part one. We're going to make this
Mhm.
a two-part because this is such, I think, an important conversation and we're learning a lot together. And so we're going to wrap up part one today with some advice I heard Donald Miller say. He's the story brand guy.
Mhm.
And it was from an Instagram reel. I will try and find it and link to it here. But he said this, and I thought it was such good advice that I'm going to show all my kids. But he said, if you're a young adult going to college, or if you're a college graduate stepping out for the first time, he said, here is my advice to you: get a job with someone that you want to be like, or who's
Mm.
doing what you want to do, and work like crazy for them for a year. Don't expect to be compensated well. Work your butt off for them for a year. He said, you will learn more in that experience than you will in your entire college education.
Mhm.
And I was like, that is such good advice.
Mhm.
That just find that person that is living life the way you want to, in whatever way that is for this child, right? For this young adult.
Mhm.
Find that person and shadow them for a year and just be their shadow for a year and learn all that you can. And that will be one of the most valuable experiences of your life.
Yeah. Good.
Well, thanks everyone for being with us today. We loved this conversation personally, and we hope you did too. We hope it's hitting you right where you are with your young adults. And so we will see you next week for part two.